going. We're going, dude. I'm recording already. It's going on YouTube.
Hello, hello. You guys can hear me good?
Yeah.
Yep. Alright, well we're gonna get started then. My name is Ryan. I'm gonna be your guys' tour guide as we travel along the park.
Right there.
Now, a few ground rules before we get going. There is no eating or drinking while on the bus, with the exception of water, of course. I also ask that while the bus is moving, that you please remain seated. Now, a little history about the park. So, African Lion Safari was founded in the year 1969, in the summer in 1969. And so this summer is our 56th summer open. Now, when the guy that started it, his name was Colonel G.D. Daly. And first of all, you have to admire the ambition of someone to start a park like this. You're gonna have a bunch of wild animals and you can drive right through. Now, yeah, if you look on the left, we have each laying 4 to 6 white eggs, so you do the math on that. We're pumping out 400 to 600 little baby goslings every year on average. So these are the electrically operated dual opening gates. You might notice the sign, trespassers will be eaten.
What?
Now, if any of you have ever watched Jurassic Park, you'll know that their gates work the same way. So it's 2 openings, 1 at a time, and that's just to make sure no animals are getting in, or getting out or in, while we go in.
Keep doors and windows.
Because in this reserve, we are going to be seeing the Watusi cattle, as well as our llamas. So already, if we take a look on the left-hand side, we have some action here. So these guys are the Watusi cattle. Now, believe it or not, this is actually one of the oldest cattle breeds in the world. They've been used by African tribes for centuries now. You might notice one very defining feature of them, and that is the incredibly large horns. Now, it is also interesting to know that even though they have such big horns, these horns are not primarily used for defense. The reason they're so big is because they actually act as a temperature control, similar to your car's radiator. So what happens, their blood then gets to cool off in the cooler air temperature before going into the body, because your body's temperature is almost always hotter than the air temperature. You might notice they can be solid in color or spotted and have many different designs on them. Also, the African tribes that own them as cattle for so long, it's interesting to know that they didn't actually use them for meat or dairy. They were actually kind of used more as really the way we use money. So they were like a social currency. So if you wanted to buy a plot of land, they might charge you, give me 4 Watusi cattle. Which, I'd say owning a wallet is a lot more easy than lugging around a bunch of Watusi cattle in order to make your payments. So we're gonna continue along and try to spot our llamas.
Llamas?
And I already see them coming up on our right-hand side here.
Me too.
I guess we have a bit of a goose crossing.
Goose crossing.
So on our right-hand side, we have the llamas. So the llamas, believe it or not, are actually a relative of the camel, even though they don't quite have that iconic hump that you might think of when you think of a camel. Now these guys, they come from South America, and they were first domesticated by the ancient Incan civilization. And even though they've been domesticated for so long, on the road right in front of cars and just refuse to get up. Also, believe it or not, the llamas are actually really good swimmers, and whenever they feel threatened, they usually head straight for the water. If you look on the right, you can see some white lines. We are going to be circling around and in that reserve soon enough.
Yeah.
So that's a little sneak peek. But now this is pretty exciting. So this area we're about to be driving through, this little fenced area, is our Cheetah Conservation Center. So if your eyes are open, you might be able to spot one.
Okay, we gotta look for them. You do?
So if you look on the left, there is a cheetah in the shade under the tree. Now, the cheetah, the reason why this is a conservation center is actually because Cheetahs are an endangered species. There's only about 7,000 of them in the wild. So places like this, we've actually had 45 cheetahs born at the park. Conservation called the Thomas Baines Trophy, which signifies excellence in conservation efforts. Now you can see another cheetah down on the left. Once again, it's harder to, well, pun intended, spot, and that's because it's in the one past this area.
I see it.
Now, cheetahs are, of course, the fastest land animal on Earth, and they can run at speeds of well over 100 kilometers an hour. If anyone is familiar with, if anyone owns any cats, you'll know they have retractable claws. The cheetah is actually the only big cat that doesn't have that. Theirs are more like a dog's, they can't retract them, and that's a trade-off to allow you to run faster because you can grab the ground a lot easier. Alright, so we are officially in our second reserve.
Dangerous
this one,
animals,
you guys are going to be
clothes?
introduced to a pride of lions, and that is because this one is known as our Simba Lion Country. So it's a 16-acre reserve, this one, and it's made to replicate their natural environment. So it's kind of field and shrubland like the African savanna. And I can already see one of our females up ahead. Now, the dominant male of this pride, his name is Bakir, and he's the only one with a mane. So if you see the one with the mane, that is Bakir. Diversity, as they say. And you know, this is kind of interesting to watch this little bird get so close to the lion there. So lions, when you think of them, you probably think of Africa, and that is a fitting thing to think because most of the lions, about 99% of their population, is found south of the Sahara Desert, which kind of runs right in the middle of Africa. However, there is actually a small population of lions in the Gir forest of India. But most people don't know this. As a species, the lion actually developed much further north, and they developed in northern Europe. In fact, during the last ice age, they were found in northern Europe. So if you look on the left-hand side, we have another one of our females laying down in the distance over there. So on average, a lion weighs 550 to 700 pounds. And they can run 80 kilometers an hour, and believe it or not, they can actually leap 11 meters. And then take into account the fact that they're the only big cat that lives in groups, known as prides. You can see how they would have so much success in the African savanna, because if you have an animal on its own that's already that big, working in groups to hunt, okay, look, we have 3 more females in the shade there. And our females heading on over to like get some cuddle, catch an animal in order to get a meal. Like here, we feed them daily, so we feed them AAA grade beef and chicken. Sometimes if you look along the grass, you can actually spot some really clean bones.
I think that's sweet over there. See? Oh, yeah.
So the babies are born after a 3.5-month pregnancy period. So if you think about the area they cover. Now, so actually if you look on top of the little shelter there, there's a big old bone behind that bush that is leftovers from some of their meals. It's also pretty interesting because whenever we feed them in here, we have a bunch of vultures that come and land in here and try to get the scraps off the bone after. But I'll say the lions do a good job at getting every little last bit of meat off the bone, and that is because if anyone has a cat or has been licked by a cat before, they have kind of coarse sandpaper-like tongues. And the reason for that is that helps you lick all the last bits of meat off a bone. So we are going to continue along now, and we're going to be in our third reserve where you guys will see more lions, but you might notice the ones in this one are going to look a little bit different, and that is because this is going to be our pride of white lions. I hope you guys, this is very exciting because the white lion is a very rare animal that most people would not get to see in their lifetime. This is called our Timbavati Lion Country, and the reason it's called that is because in the wild you would only find the white lion in a remote area of South Africa known as Timbavati, and globally there's actually only 300 white lions in the world, and that includes ones in captivity. So we actually have 2 prides of white lions and 1 pride of the regular lions. The dominant male of this one, his name is Feta. So it looks like they're behind the shelter, so we're gonna try to peer around. You might be able to see, oh, there's Feta up ahead. Now the female on the far right, she's actually one of the biggest lions in the park, and she is very, very large. Her name is Brie. You might notice that they're all named after white cheese. These ones, when they're born, they're said that they look like little polar bear cubs because they're fully white. And there's popular misconception. A lot of people believe that the white lion is just an albino lion, but it's actually, park is opened or after hours, you can actually hear their roar all throughout the entire park. And you know, they told me about that when I started working here, and I heard it for the first time during training, and I'm telling you, these roars, you feel it in your chest, even though you're on the other side of the park. It's really quite a sound to hear. And if you think about it, a lot of the farmland around here, they would actually hear lion roars in the morning, which is a pretty cool thought. Now there's a lot of folklore about the lion. A lot of South African tribes, the one to deliver the final blow or bite, which is to the neck. I know that's a little gruesome, but that is the wild. You guys also might notice all these zebra striped trucks as we travel throughout the park. These guys are called the game wardens, and it's a pretty fun job. They basically get to just look at lions and animals all day sitting in their truck, but ultimately they're there to make sure the animals are behaving themselves, but really more importantly to make sure that people who are driving throughout the park in their own cars are behaving themselves, because the last thing you want is someone in the lion area putting their window down, or worse, getting into their car. And if you take a look on our right hand side as we pass through here, this fenced off area is where they sleep at night, so that's the lion sleeping complex, and we don't actually have to usher them over there. When they're tired, usually around 6 p.m., they just head there on their own. You'll also notice we have animals such as the lion in these reserves, but the gates are wide open, and that's one of the jobs of the game wardens, is to monitor where the animals are throughout the reserve. And then that's why my radio up here is always going off, because I'm on the same radio channel as them. They have to radio to communicate to the people at the gates how open or closed the gate should be based off where the animal is. So the area we're currently traveling through is known as No Man's Land. And the reason for that is because there are no animals here. Instead, this serves as a really nice natural barrier between our carnivores, or meat eaters, and our herbivores, because herbivore is a plant eater. It's not the best idea to mix those two, so we have a nice little barrier. So we are officially entering our 4th reserve, which is known as the Wanky Bushland Trail. And in this one, you'll be introduced to our troop of savanna baboons. If you take a look on the left-hand side, we call that our Monkey Jungle Bypass Road. And the reason for that is because a lot of people who come through here in their own vehicles, they choose to skip this one. And I probably would too, because the baboons like to take a lot of souvenirs off your car, like your windshield wipers, for example. And also leave some souvenirs of their own on your car, if you know what I mean. One thing you'll notice about this reserve is it's our most heavily forested one. So I always invite people to keep your eyes really open in this one and on the tree line, because we actually have the baboons as well as antelope species known as the bongo in here, and cattle species, the miniature zebu. But the bongo is a very timid animal and usually pretty hard to spot. In fact, you can go some tours without seeing them. And that's because they're nocturnal, so they're usually hiding in the forested areas. Now, all these trees throughout here actually fruit later on in the season, so they'll get berries on them, and the baboon troop, which is we're going to see more up front because that's where they usually are. But when all these fruit and get their berries, the baboons make their way throughout this entire area, just eating all the berries all day. Alright, so you might already be seeing some baboons. We're gonna circle around and get right up close and personal with them. And you might also notice it looks like some cows just hanging out with them. Those are the miniature zebu, the only miniature breed of cattle in the world because they're not actually bred down from a larger sized cow. The males never exceed 600 pounds. So we have our baboons right here. They're giving us quite the view of their big red bums. So you'll also notice there's some smaller ones we got here. The one climbing up there, that is one of our 2-year-olds. And we kind of have a 1 and a 2-year-old that are sort of the little troublemakers of this troop right now. We also actually, with the zebu being next to them, and that's because the zebu is actually one of the calmest, most friendly, and gentle cow species in the world, so they make great cows. So, a baboon. There's another little 1-year-old. So the babies are born after a 6-month pregnancy period. And when they're born, their skin is totally pink, like their butts actually. And their hair is entirely black. And even though baboons are actually excellent climbers, as some of our little 1-year-olds might put on a climbing show for us to see, they actually spend most of their day on the ground, and they travel on average. And you can see the young kids definitely are the ones always with the most energy. So baboons are omnivores like us, which means they eat both meat and plants. They have both audible noises, like they have like barking noises, kind of similar to a dog actually, and they have grunts and screams. They also have physical communication, which includes nose-to-nose touching, which is kind of a cute one. They even shrug their shoulders, which I find kind of funny. And one of the ones they do is they smack their lips, and it's actually to hang out with the child. It actually smacks its lips at the mom. So we are going to be continuing along. Get our last looks at the baboons. Sometimes they hang out in this area on the left in the trees as well. Alright, so the building on the right hand side that you see there, we call that the Monkey Motel. And that is because the baboons sleep there at night. If you see the little brown cage chute, that's where they climb up to get in. And similar to the lions, you don't really have to usher them over. Throughout the day, the baboons actually slowly make their way towards that as they get progressively more tired. Sometimes if the weather's not the best, they'll just go right in front of that. Also, this person, who is actually unique to this gate, you'll only see them here. Their whole job is just to check to see if there's any baboons hitching a ride on anyone's vehicle, so that we don't bring a baboon into the next reserve. And speaking of the next reserve, I hope you guys are excited. We are officially in the 5th reserve, known as the African Savannah. So this is our largest reserve by area and by species. We have 9 different animals in here. I guess 10 if you count the Canada goose. And the The layout of this is designed to replicate the natural African plains, but you'll notice we have some rock structures and a little man-made mountain on the left, and that's good for our climbing species, like you can already see them, the Barbary sheep. We are going to be getting a nice closer view of them soon enough. So in this reserve we have many different animals. We have giraffe, zebra, rhino, just to name a few. So you can probably already see quite a few different animals. We are going to be getting right up close to see them.
I see it. Oh, there's the rhino. Oh!
We do have 4 rhinos, so if you see the one there, just know there's 3 more elsewhere. But to start, if you take a look on the right hand side, this is actually one of my favorite animals we have at the park. I think they're quite beautiful. This is the largest antelope species on Earth that you are currently seeing, and it is called the eland. On average, the full-grown ones weigh about 2,200 pounds. The females actually have the larger horns. Theirs are a bit more slender and hollow though. And you might notice on some, it's kind of hard to see, but they have very vague little white stripes on their side. Those are not for camouflage, they actually act as an optical illusion. So what that does is, if I'm a leopard or a lion that's trying to hunt them and I see them in the distance, those little white stripes make it look like their ribs are sticking out, or they're a little more thin and they don't have as much meat on them, so then less meat on the plate. I don't want that meal, I'll go for a different one. Fun fact, they can jump pretty far from a standing start. They can actually leap 11 feet. We're going to continue along here. Alright, so there's actually a rhino right in front of this car. Now, we have to be very careful about the rhinos in cars here, because rhinos are incredibly big animals. I mean, you just look at them, they look like a tank. They weigh 5,000 pounds on average, so they're incredibly heavy. We have 3 females and 1 male here, and the females are always together. The male his name's Mac, and he's usually the one you see on his own, so all over them, which they do. So that's called wallowing. The rhinos will kind of lay and roll in the mud a lot of the day, so our other females on the left over there. And that's actually really good for their skin. They can get sunburned, so that prevents sunburn, and it keeps harmful bugs like ticks or annoying flies off of them. The species of rhino we have here is the white rhino. All of them, the ones we have here, are from Kruger National Park in South Africa. And one of my favorite ways to think about a historical perspective to imagine seeing these animals for the first time is when you think of ancient Rome, and they had the big Colosseum, and they used to have all these animals in them because the Romans were making their way through Africa for the first time, where these animals lived. You would go to see a show at the Colosseum, and you have never heard of a rhino, you've never seen a picture of one, you don't even know they exist, and you go to the show, and then is our fingernails, which is called keratin. But unfortunately, there are quite a few people that believe their horns have magical powers, and they get hunted in the wild for that. But I've never seen my fingernail clippings do anything magical, so it's probably not the best reason to hunt them. You will notice that they're called the white rhino, but they're not really white. They're kind of more gray in color. The reason for this is because they get their name from the Afrikaans word "wide," which means wide or square-lipped, and that's in reference to their big mouths, because if you watch them, they're grazers, so they kind of crop and clip the ground and take a bunch of bites of grass. They take 70 to 80 bites. So we're going to go see our male rhino, Mac, as I continue the talks. You can always tell it's the male because A, he'll be more on his own, and B, he has the longest horn, and he's pretty big. So this is Mac. Now, but they can actually surprisingly run at speeds of 50 kilometers an hour. And one thing about the rhino, their worst sense is their eyesight. They don't actually have very good eyesight, so they kind of make sense of the world. Alright, so we're going to continue along to some of our other animals now. As you can see, there's lots of Canada geese. Alright, so packing at the cars ahead of us, we have the largest bird in the world, the ostrich. Now, let me tell you one thing about the ostrich. One thing you definitely learn while working here is the ostrich is really not a very intelligent animal. Believe it or not, the eyeball of the ostrich is larger than their brain. So they're kind of just like really big chickens. And this is a very typical activity for an ostrich here at the park. They cause the most traffic jams of any animal because legs actually allow them to run at speeds of 70 kilometers an hour. Their eggs are also 4 pounds and 30 times the mass of a chicken egg, so you can imagine how big an ostrich omelet would be. Alright, we're going to continue along. We do have more ostrich in the reserve, so we'll probably see more further down. Now, coming up, you'll see some horned animals. These are the Barbary sheep. And you'll also notice some babies. So the babies were born end of March, early April. And all of the ones you're seeing right now are either babies or females, and that's because the males are actually not the best fathers. We'll see the males later on, but they never hang out with the females and the kids. They're always on their own. So these guys are native to northern Africa, and they're excellent climbers. And it's kind of interesting, the babies really don't take long in order to become climbers as well as the parents, and actually right after they're born they jump around like quite a bit. Now, unfortunately in the wild, the population of these guys is at risk due to hunting, but surprisingly enough, there's actually an established population of Barbary sheep in the Colorado River in the United States because someone decided to release some there, and then the terrain was similar to their native habitat, so it just worked out. Alright, so coming up on our left-hand side is the most common grazing animal you'll see in the African savanna, the wildebeest. The one we have here is the white-bearded wildebeest. Now, if anyone has seen The Lion King, when Mufasa took his little tumble down in the ravine, these guys were the animals running through it. So the wildebeest they make up the second largest migration on Earth. There's 1.5 million of them in a single herd in the Serengeti in Africa. And they all move around together, and they actually follow the rain clouds as they move throughout the whatever area they're in, and that's because that's where they get the freshest grass to eat. And when you move in a big group like that, you kick up a lot of dust. So they actually have specialized nose flaps that filter out the air they breathe. And typical for the Barbary sheep, you can see some on the left again, sitting on the rocks. If you take a look in the distance on the right-hand side, you'll see an antelope species grazing down there. That is the addax, and they are native to the Sahara Desert, which is why they have that white hair, because it reflects the heat. A little fun fact about those guys, they can actually live without drinking water, and that's because they can get all the moisture they need just from the shrubs and plants they eat. I'm sure we've all seen the giraffe from the distance. They're pretty hard to miss, being the tallest land animal on Earth. We actually have the largest herd of giraffe in Canada here at African Lion Safari. And you know what? Every time I've come through here, this giraffe has been playing with a stick the past few days. So giraffe, you'll also notice they all have spots, or this kind of patchy pattern, of course, but it's interesting because each of their patterns is different, just like how all our fingerprints are different. Weigh about, on average, 3,500 pounds. And they'll be 6 meters tall. So, when we were in the lion area, I mentioned an animal that sleeps way less than a lion because they have to worry about predators, and that is the giraffe. The giraffe sleeps on average 30 minutes a day, and they do it standing up. So, it's kind of impressive. Now, the baby, when they're born, is 1.8 meters tall, and they weigh on average about 145 pounds. So, the baby giraffe is the size of a grown man. So you can imagine carrying a grown man around in your stomach. Also, you might notice the little bumps on their head. Those are not actually horns. A lot of people believe that they're called ossicones, with some skin and hair on top of them. And even though they're so tall and so big, they actually have the same number of vertebrae as a mouse, which is 7. So you can imagine how big one of those vertebrae from the mother and the kids. Just not very involved fathers. If you take a look on the right-hand side, this antelope species, it looks similar to the addax, but it's a bit different. This is the scimitar horned oryx. They're also native to the Sahara Desert, and they get their name from their long, curved horns, which there's an Asian type of sword, which is also long and curved, called a scimitar, so then you get the scimitar horned oryx. Now, these guys, unfortunately, actually went extinct in the wild in 2000, but the C2S2 program, which African Lion Safari, it's a success story. Hopefully things stay that way. And of course, on our left-hand side, one of probably the most iconic animals, we have the classic black and white stripes, is the zebra. So the zebra is often called the wild horse of Africa, and that is because it is a horse species. On average, they weigh about 650 pounds, and they run 65 kilometers an hour. And even though the zebra is a horse species, they're actually the only horse species that we have not been able to domesticate. And believe me, we tried, but we've kind of learned that the zebra is a pretty stubborn animal, and they can also actually be a bit aggressive. They can bite. The white stripes would reflect the heat, and the black stripes would absorb them. So we are now going to be heading out of the African savanna. If you look down at the water in front of us, this big kind of lake we have here, that's our watering hole. And on really hot days, so in like June, July, August, a lot of the animals will be here, especially the rhinos. They'll be wallowing in the mud on the side banks. And it's always funny to see the giraffe drink here because in order to get their head down to the water, they have to spread their legs really wide, and it almost looks like they're trying to do the splits. Right now, you'll probably just see lots of bird species native to southern Ontario. The small little ones that are swooping along the water, those are called swallow. And they eat little bugs that fly along the surface or little bugs on the surface of the water. Alrighty, so we are going to be going into our 6th reserve, which is known as Australasia. And it's called that because we have both animals from Australia and Asia. So already, if you take a look on the left-hand side, you'll notice a big animal with shaggy black fur. This is the yak, and they're native to Tibet and the Himalaya regions, and you might notice a really tiny little one taking a nap there. That is a baby that was born last week. So the yak, they on average weigh about 2,500 pounds. Yak's baby is threatened, or they feel like they have to protect the baby. They actually form a big circle around the baby with all their horns facing out like an impenetrable wall. Also, fun fact about them, they are the hoofed mammal that holds the record for being able to survive at the highest altitudes because they're from mountainous areas. And they can actually, if you look on the right, you'll see a game warden ushering an ostrich forward. That is because the ostrich likes to walk towards the gate down there, so they just give them a little walk forward. And I mentioned Australia, so you'll see some kangaroos up here.
Yeah. That's the big bump. Whoa.
So the kangaroo is a national animal of Australia. The one we have here is the red kangaroo. Now, you might notice that some of them look kind of more reddish orangish and some of them look more gray. The males are the more reddish color, and they are known as jacks and the... So there's a whole bunch of them. Alright, continuing along. If you take a look on the left-hand side, you'll notice a kind of antelope species. This is actually the largest antelope species of India, and it's called the nilgai. And the reason they're called nilgai is nil in a lot of the Indian languages. You might also notice two deer on the left-hand side with some big old antlers. Those guys are called the Pierre David's deer, and they're actually the most aquatic deer in the world. They have webbed, hooved feet. So basically that means they love the water. And I'm not gonna lie, this is actually one of the closest viewings I've ever had of them. Once more. Now, coming up, you guys are gonna see another rhino. But you might notice that this one looks a little bit different than the ones we just saw, and that is because this is a different species of rhino, known as the greater one-horned rhino, or the Indian rhinoceros. They're a bit smaller than the African rhinos, and they only have one horn, so there they are in the distance on the right-hand side. Now, this guy, his name is Naboo. And you might be wondering why he has his own area that's not just open and in this area. The reason is because Naboo, and I will tell you, he was being completely friendly, so he's just kind of giving us a view of his bum right now. But he was being completely friendly, and he did mean well, but he was trying to play with a lot of our deer and antelope species in here. And if you're a much smaller deer, antelope species as well, so it's quite large. There are also, a lot of the animals in this one love the water, and that's no different for the greater one-horned rhino or the Indian rhino. They actually swim like a hippo, and basically what that means is sinking. You sink to the bottom and then push off and continue going along. Alright, so coming up, this is an animal I always like showing people because I have barely met anyone that actually knows this animal exists, and I think they're such a cool looking one. but this is the Sichuan Takin. So these guys are from China, and they are quite an animal. They look like they have the body of a bear, the horns of a bison, and kind of like the face of a moose. And they are protected by Chinese law to the same extent as the giant panda. They're actually considered a national treasure of China. And they have two really large parks in China, all devoted to the protection. See them standing up, they're usually sitting down, but I'll tell you, when they stand up, they're surprisingly a lot taller than you'd be expecting. Or at least than I was expecting. I don't know what you're expecting. If you take a look on the left-hand side in the distance, we didn't really get a good view of them, but that smaller deer came from the Japanese word shika, which actually means deer, so they're kind of called deer. Similar to like naan bread or chai tea. We also have some donkeys on the right-hand side in there. Now, the donkey was first domesticated by the ancient Egyptians, and it is said that they are one of the smartest farm animals. But now we are headed to our 7th and final reserve, known as the Americas. Also, if you take a look on the left, you might be able to sneak peek back into the lion enclosure. Coming up on our right-hand side, this animal is actually technically a part of the 6th reserve, but they kind of just have their own area here. But these are called the markhor, and they're the largest wild goat species in the world. The males are the ones that have these very long, twirly, curly horns, and they're from the mountainous regions of the Middle East. Actually, just yesterday when I was working and doing a tour, I heard over the radio that they had a baby born. So, just yesterday, there was a baby markhor born. If you take a look on the left-hand side, they're pretty hard to miss because there's an awful lot of them. These are the spotted fallow deer, and they come from Great Britain and Europe, but we actually have a population of them now in North America since they've been released. You'll notice that they're beginning to grow in a new set of antlers. So the males get the antlers, and when they first grow in, they're called a picket. If you're wondering why we have so many of them, it's because they multiply very quickly. So on average, a full-grown elk weighs about 992 pounds. When the babies are born, they're kind of a reddish color, and they're always born away from the herd so that they don't attract predators like wolves or mountain lions or bears. And they're found in western Canada, near the foothill regions of the Rocky Mountains in western United States. And a little fun fact, the males, they actually have the fastest growing bone of any animal in their antlers, because when they're growing their antlers, they grow an inch a day. It's very fast. We might get a view of more of the elk, because we do have more of them. They might be further in the reserve. Also, I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard the call that the elks make, especially during their mating season, but it's almost like a whistling, like, scream, like, call. It's actually a pretty cool sound. Almost all the elk we have are females, but the males get this really cool, especially in the mating season, big, thick, like almost mane-like thing on their neck. Now we have some big ol' shaggy brown furred animals coming up on the left-hand side. These guys are the bison. Now, there are two species of bison. There's the woodland bison and the prairie bison. The prairie bison is a bit smaller. The the ones we have here are the prairie bison. You might notice a lot of them, it looks like their hair is falling right off their body, and that is because they're shedding their winter coats. So they get a lot more hair in the winter, and then it comes off in preparation for the hotter months. Now, these guys are also very big. They weigh about 2,500 pounds on average, similar to the yak. And you'll notice they have very big, bulky heads. Now, believe it or not, there was 70 million of these guys in the wild in North America, and they were unfortunately hunted to extinction. However, there's once more a wild population, but for a good long time you would only actually find bison in like ranches or captive settings. They're the largest grazing herbivore of North America. They're also found in the same areas as the elk, so Western Canada and the United States. And a little fun fact, there is a difference between a bison and a buffalo, so I don't know if anyone knows about the Buffalo Bills logo, but it's actually a bison on there, because the buffalo have the much longer horns and more slender hair and not the muscle hump on the back. Bison, stockier, small horns, big muscle hump on the back. Now, with all that said, we are approaching the end of the tour. I'd just like to remind you guys that we do have many other amenities here at the park. We have the elephant viewing area, which is all the way at the end of Tusker Trail, so if you go to that there, you might be able to catch a glimpse of our Asian elephants. We also have 3 wild animal shows, which includes the Parrot Paradise Show, the Birds of Prey flying demonstration and viewing aviaries, as well as the Wild Wonders Show. We have 2 complimentary nature scenic tours at the Nature Scenic Railway, which sometimes gets you a view of the elephants from a different angle, as well as the African Queen boat cruise, which you might be able to see some monkey and primate species on that one. We have a 300-seat restaurant at the Mombasa Market. Everything should be in your program and map. If you didn't get one, they can be found at all main buildings. And if you liked what you saw today, you can consider getting a season's pass. Those can be bought at guest service.